There was this woman named Lisa. Now, Lisa said she grew up in the suburbs of Dallas and she lived in this very old home. Now, she said one night she put her daughter down to bed and, went to bed herself. The next morning, she goes and she gets her daughter up, and her daughter says to her, "Thank you, mommy." And she goes, "Thank you for what?" And she goes, "Well, thank you for coming in the room last night and holding my hand." And she goes, "What do you mean? I wasn't in your room." And she's like, "Yeah, you were holding my hand and your hands were really cold." And so, like, her mom was like, what is she talking about? Like, maybe she had a dream. Another night, she said she was asleep in her bed and she wakes up to her husband. He's like standing over her with his face in her face. And she said, like, he looked just really, really creepy. And he was just kind of laughing and rocking back and forth. So she like turned over and was like, "Leave me alone. I'm trying to sleep." After about 20 minutes, she got up and she goes into the living room only to find her husband asleep on the couch. But she said the scariest thing that happened to her is one night she was putting away laundry and they had this spare bedroom that they never used. Well, one night she happens to see that the door is open and the lights turned on. And she said when she looked into the room over at the closet, which was cracked, she sees a person standing in the closet, except that person looks exactly like her. So she said shortly after this, they had moved out of the house and a friend of hers actually bought the home and she started this daycare. So one day she went to go and visit and drop off some stuff to the daycare. And as she comes inside, one of the girls goes, "Hey, you're back, you're back." And she goes, "What do you mean?" And she goes, "Well, I played with you a couple times in the bedroom in the back." And she's like, I've never been here until today. And she was like confused and she realized like this girl had seen her, but it wasn't her. This case still bothers me to this day, and I really never could fully explain what had happened. Now, we were investigating a case in central Illinois. This man had reached out to me about his mother, and he said she lived in this rural part of town. Every night, something was harassing her. It would come and bang on the door. It would bang on the windows. It would run around the house laughing. It would leave scratches on the siding. And yet, the mother never seen this thing. And he had stayed with her. This thing wouldn't come. He called the police. The police showed up and they watched the house. They couldn't catch anyone. He almost thought that maybe his mother was, finally losing her mind, until he had set up a camera on her porch and caught this image of this strange looking person. Now, he said when he seen the picture, at that point in time, he felt whatever this was not human, but something supernatural. So that's why he then reached out to me. So we, went to her house and we met with her and her son, and they were just honest, hardworking people that really didn't want attention, didn't want to be bothered. You could tell that something was happening, that they were truly afraid. And we searched around the entire house looking for footprints, looking for any kind of evidence to suggest that maybe this just is a person messing with this old woman. We couldn't find anything. We did notice some strange scratches on the wood siding. But outside of that, we couldn't figure out what it was. And so I decided, let's do an overnight investigation outside. Well, it seems like this thing is, knows when people are waiting for it. So maybe if we do kind of like a reconnaissance mission, through the woods, stay away from the house, and then kind of see if we can flank it towards the house. Maybe we can run into it. Maybe we can experience it. So we went out, night vision cameras, and we had a bunch of equipment. We were out in the woods for several hours trying to see if we could encounter this thing. Well, that's when we noticed this light in the woods, and we started following it. And it looked like maybe if someone had been shining a flashlight walking through this particular part of the forest. So we chased after this light, and we would follow it and it would move, and we would follow it and it would move, and we could never get close to it. After probably about 45 minutes of following this light, we hear what sounded like, this evil laugh coming in the direction of this woman's house. So we take off as fast as we can towards her house, trying to run into whatever this is. By the time we get there, it's gone. Like, there's nothing there. And what we realized is that it created a distraction to lure us away so that it could swoop in and go to this house and mess with this lady. And, whatever this was, it was something that was intelligent, it was smart, but it was just never seen. We went out there a couple more times, we never could figure out what it was. But I was able to talk to the lady, and I said, it seems like whatever this is, it's feeding off the fact that it's scaring you, and it seems to like to be able to cause fear. And when you get afraid, it gets more powerful, and it's drawing energy. So I said, you know what this is, and that it can't enter your home, and that it's not going to harm you. So when this happens, just ignore it, don't show fear. And she took that advice, and it just stopped. Whatever it was, like it stopped coming. And still to this day, I cannot figure out what exactly that was harassing this lady, because it was unlike anything that I had ever experienced before. You ever had sleep paralysis? Now, one of the things that people tell me who've experienced sleep paralysis is that they often see these very dark negative entities. Is this just simply a side effect of sleep paralysis, or is something else happening? Now, this is a story that I had heard out of Tennessee. There was this man who one day he went to bed, and he said he just had this dream, but in his dream it felt really real. Like, he woke up, he went to work, he, ate dinner and did everything throughout his whole entire day, but it was just a dream. And then he woke up. We said as he woke up, he noticed he could not move his body, and he just felt like something was wrong, and he felt just this sense of dread. And he said all of a sudden, he sees something come up on the side of him. And he said it was this gray looking being with sharp nails, jagged teeth, solid black eyes, no hair. And this thing was just sort of looking at him and staring at his face. And he said this thing just kind of got up and it walked around his room and was kind of making this almost hissing type sound. And he said then all of a sudden it was he finally woke up and everything was all right. And he looked around his room, that thing, whatever it wasn't there. So he went and talked to his friend about it the next day, and his friend said, you probably had sleep paralysis. And he thought, well, I don't know much about that, but maybe you're right. So next night he goes to bed, right? And same thing happens. He has the same dream that he goes throughout his day, and then he wakes up and he can't move. And once again, he sees this thing in his room. And he said this thing went over to his dresser and opens the dresser up and starts pulling his clothes out and is looking at it and kind of moving it around. And then he said this thing was just kind of going around his room looking through all of his stuff. And then he once again wakes up and this thing is no longer in his room. And this went on for weeks. But he said he started to notice as this progressed, it was harder and harder for him to wake up. And no matter how hard he tried, it would just take forever for him to kind of get through this dream. So he said this one specific night, everything happens the same, and he wakes up, can't move. And that thing was in his room. And he said this thing just sort of lifted up his shirt and then scratched him on his chest. And then he lifted up his pant leg and moved his, claws down his leg and scratched his leg. And he was trying his hardest to wake up. And he said he could hear his roommate outside talking out of the room, but he couldn't scream. He couldn't say anything to get his friend's attention. And then finally, boom, he woke up. And when he woke up, he said he felt burning on his stomach or on his chest and on his leg. And when he looked, he had scratch marks, that were actually there from his dream. And so he told his friend, like what was going on. And he showed him the scratch marks. And he said, well, have you thought about like doing sort of this like sage blessing over your room and stuff? So he did some research. He got some sage, and he said he did this like sage thing over his room. And after that, the dreams stopped and they went away. But he always like thought about, could it ever come back?